Thanks very much for this opportunity on behalf of Microsoft to come and talk to you today. I've kind of got 5 or 6 different elements. I'll talk a little bit about what Microsoft are doing around AI, we call that our AI advantage. I want to talk to you a bit about AI enablement, and then there's an element in here where we're sort of focusing on the education. And there's an element that follows that around getting going. I'm conscious that people are on a journey here. Some people may not have started, some people may be initialised, but perhaps haven't gone big. And then there are some supporting materials that I want to sort of share with you as well. And I've got two machines here because last week I was in a conference in the US talking to a large number of the academics from US institutions and the CIOs and their teams who have been pioneering some of this stuff. So I've got some notes here that complement the slides I shared with John before I went away. There are some stats that I want to share which I think you might find quite interesting. So as a company, we're on a mission, and that's from an education context to empower every student, educator, researcher and education organisation on the planet to achieve more. Our Chief Executive, Satya, has spoken previously on this in many different contexts. But the essence of his message is that we want to empower educators to help students gain critical foundational and workplace skills that will accelerate learning and help every student catch up, keep up, and get ahead. So I wanted to then switch to this, which I think is one of the key messages I'd like you to move away from this. It's not a binary conversation, right? There's a lot of nuance around this. One of the key messages from the institutions in the US, who are in some cases well over 12 months into their journey of implementing these solutions and running them within their organizations, is you need to have a slightly pioneering spirit. Don't wait for perfect. If you wait for perfect, you'll never get it live. One of the key messages in this is you need to get this in front of people and you need to start listening to the feedback that they provide on what you've offered to them. Because this is going to be an iterative process. Just been working with an organisation. After the 9th iteration of the solution and we showed it to them, suddenly there was this moment where it clicked and it all fell into place, and they finally appreciated the work that had been going into the iterative process of refining the solution that then became available. I'll give you a couple of examples that illustrate the message. University of Tennessee. Okay, and the University of Tennessee built their first AI in 2 weeks and 3 days, to be precise. Right? And they launched it. And it was the positive reception of that fast prototype, which then has given them the runway to then invest in building out the next generation of tools that will follow it. The perhaps seminal university example is the University of Michigan, who in September last year announced to the world their intent to democratize this within their own organisation. It would be available to all staff, all students, in 3 flavours. A chat interface, a product which they call Maisie, which integrates the Microsoft Graph API with business data. In their case, they integrated it with their Canvas learning management system, allowing people to have conversations and interrogate that business data. And they offered a third tier, perhaps more focused at research academics, which was allowing them to advance their research. So as of last week, when the CIO from University of Michigan spoke at the conference, they've now got over 2,500 Maisies in operation within the university. And to give you a flavour of one of them, now in under 10 seconds, it allows students to be advised on the financial scholarships that are available to them, a process which would previously have taken between 6 months and a year. Okay? This is about breaking down some of those barriers to education and enabling people to do really exciting things. So the data that you see on the slide here comes from the AI in Education report, which Microsoft published back in March. I've spoken about this slide at conferences previously, and I've tended to indicate one of them, which is down in the student row at the bottom, which is that one of the capabilities of this set of technologies is it's a thing that helps people overcome effectively writer's block. You know, often the hardest thing to do is to get going. But this is a great way of getting going, right? But then you, as the subject matter expert, need to look at that output and say, well, actually, it's not bad, but I would change this and that, right? Because for the audience that I'm talking to, or the outcome that I'm trying to achieve, I need something different. Now, you could iterate with the technology, but it gets you going. For today, what I want to talk to you in a bit more detail about are two themes that I think have come up in all of the presentations we've heard. One is about accessibility, and the other one's about inclusivity. So as we begin to think about how we can use technology to make access to educational resources and other things more equitable, there are a number of key themes. You can see them on this slide. But one of the key questions that I've had from universities that I've been working with is, well, how can we use some of this technology to make our working environments more inclusive? Now, there is a YouTube channel that Microsoft have, which is all about making these technologies more accessible. They give the examples of people with a range of disabilities, from dyslexia through to people who are recovering from strokes and a range of others. And it highlights the way in which the technology has empowered them to operate on a more level playing field within their organisation. So what I would like to share with you next is a story which Satya, our chief exec, shared at the last Ignite event. Apologies if you've seen it before, but I think what you'll find is that Anton's story is quite powerful.
My name is Anton and I'm from Ukraine. As a freelance developer living with cerebral palsy, tasks like typing and speaking can be difficult, which limits my ability to communicate effectively. I realized early on that I was different from others and encountered discrimination and inequality at a young age. I always inform my clients about my disability. Moreover, I present it as an advantage because it provides me with extensive experience in solving complex and unconventional problems. When I first heard about GitHub Copilot, I was doubtful that it could handle such a complex task as coding, but I was surprised at how helpful and relevant the suggestions it gave me were. Because of my disability, it's easier to type fewer characters. I can now not only write the code itself, but also detailed comments, documentation, and project descriptions. Previously, I physically couldn't afford to do this. I firmly believe that AI has enormous potential to make a positive impact on the lives of people with disabilities. It has truly assisted me to optimize my workflow. I aim to harness the power of AI for the betterment of our lives.
So I think there are some very inspiring examples of how this technology is making a difference. Whether it's in the type of example that you've seen there in Anton's case, or whether it's about developing new learning tools or providing aids for creating content, building AI literacy, improving services that we offer to the students within our institutions, might be simplifying scheduling or many other examples. One of the things that also comes up is around security, and there's a very important conversation to be having there, because there are concerns about how we provide protections for data, prevent unauthorized access, and promote an approach to responsible AI use. Security and AI adoption are not mutually exclusive, right? There are opportunities in this space and the ways in which we move forward. So the potential applications of AI in education are quite tremendous. We're committed to developing secure and inclusive solutions to help everyone reach their highest potential. And that's possible through the technology that powers our tools. So Microsoft Copilot is the sort of brand that describes a number of Copilot products. So if you're used to using the Office suite, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc., there are individual Copilots for each of those. GitHub Copilot, which you saw in the Anton story, was our first, and we've developed from that starting position subsequently. Sorry, user error. Here we go. So this slide details a number of the freely available AI-powered solutions. Beyond that, the opportunity is to look at the Microsoft Copilots. That's the one that ties into that Office suite of products. But now there is a very keen conversation from a large number of organisations who are interested in pursuing what the Americans have been doing for a bit longer than some of us in the UK, which is to begin to associate that AI technology with their own institutional data. And partly that's where the Microsoft advantage comes in, because we containerise it within your organisational tenant. We're not using that information to train the underlying language model, and your information is private to you. We don't have eyes on that. That's a core principle of our approach. We've also developed this set of 6 responsible AI principles. We've experimented in AI in the past, and if you follow the press, you'll know that some of those early experiments weren't the successes that we would have liked. So in combination from our company learning experience, we've also got our own research institute within Microsoft called Microsoft Research, with hubs around the world. And we've had a team working on the elements that sit behind this, because in addition to the responsible AI principles, what we've also developed is a framework that supports the all-up approach in this space. And so that responsible AI standard is public, and we welcome opportunity to have discourse around that and help shape this starting point that we've made available. Right? We appreciate this isn't a finished work, that will need to continue to evolve in light of regulation and other things that emerge as we move forward as a society. Inclusivity is one of our 6 AI principles, and at Microsoft we approach inclusive design starting with 3 key principles, and these are they. So we recognise that exclusion can be a factor. We want to learn from diversity, and as a company we're very fortunate to have tremendous exposure to organisations and entities all over the world. So we can take that international lens, and as we recognise individual challenges, we look to solve it once and then look at how we can extend that and provide it as an inbuilt benefit to society as a whole. As we look at the organisations that we've been working with, those that have prioritised accessibility have seen some incredible benefits, and you can see a summary of some of those statistics in this slide. I think that the key message here is that accessibility has perhaps never been more important, and for those of us who work in education, we've seen an increasing number of people over the last 2 decades who are identifying as having a form of disability, and whether they're students or staff, we have to find ways in which we can support and accommodate them within our organisations. So I think when we talk about empowering people, we simply mean that with the right tools, anyone can do anything. And that's everyone in every context. You may not know that many of the existing Microsoft tools and apps have AI-infused accessibility features. We integrated Azure Cognitive Services to enhance productivity and collaboration in our applications. There are some examples here of our progress and coach applications, which we have purposely developed for education, to provide students with a means of overcoming anxiety and mastering key literacy, numeracy, and speaking and presentation skills. Because doing this with AI gives them that ability to practice in private and refine their skills without the embarrassment of peer pressure. Okay? The technology is infinitely patient. It's non-judgmental, right? You keep cracking at it until you get to a level of confidence where you feel that you can present this to others and talk with confidence. And of course, because it's AI, we can also introduce multilingual capabilities. So if English isn't your first language, you can try it in a different language and get equal level of support. I spoke earlier about the potential. I think we're now progressing to a point of technology involvement in core products, which is far beyond that pop-out panel when you're in PowerPoint Designer, which has always had an underpinning of AI. But now you're interacting with the technology using natural language, and you're asking it to do things to help you. So that concept of perhaps having used a generative AI conversation to help you produce a Word document, you can now take into a concept of, okay, turn that Word document into a PowerPoint presentation, right? And it will do that for you as an automated process. Now, of course, you could do it yourself, but there's a significant time saving that is from this. Perhaps collaborate with other people across your organisation. So one of the new tools that has emerged within this Microsoft 365 environment in our Wave 2 release is a capability called Pages, which is designed to allow that collaborative exercise to be a much more inclusive process, to really empower people to work across an organisation. Been a lot of interest from research groups within organisations about how they could employ that to collaborate on the work that they're doing. Perhaps that's looking at the future funding that they might be trying to acquire. So as a recap, as an organisation, we're on a mission to provide more inclusive solutions for a very broad spectrum of users, to accommodate needs and empower everyone. And so at that juncture, I wanted to kind of focus a bit more on education and the work that we have been doing in this space. We see lots of opportunity to improve experiences and outcomes. I think that's a topic we've heard from other speakers earlier today. And in this slide here, we're beginning to think about how do we adapt to change. So I mentioned the University of Michigan before. Ravi Pence is the CIO. In his address at the EDUCAUSE conference last week, he made this statement, and it got a lot of interest from the audience. So he said that at the University of Michigan now, all students who graduate should have at least one core module in AI. As an institution, they now see it as their responsibility to ensure that the workforce is enabled for the future with the key skills that they feel people will need to be active participants in the modern workplace. And so we've got a set of tools relevant to both students and staff, which provide a means of safely leveraging AI, whether that's supporting the development of prompt engineering or innovating with custom co-pilots. And I think I'll just pause there, because when this technology launched, a lot of technical people began talking about prompt engineering, which is a key skill for the modern age, right? But I think as soon as you put engineering into a phrase like that, you put people on the back foot, because if you haven't got a scientific or an engineering background, it might seem quite intimidating. So the language that I have tended to use in more recent times is to talk about developing prompt literacy. We're effectively talking about the same thing, but I think it's a softer way of introducing the topic and to begin to get people to understand the importance of the iterative process that you go through. We talk about Copilot, it's an assistant to help you, as I said before, very patient, non-judgmental, and you can have a conversation with it in natural language, but it may not understand what it is you're trying to achieve first time round. So you are going to have to spend a bit of time to get to know each other and how to get the best out of this. And what you will find is that as it's very akin to an intern. It can do a lot of heavy lifting for you. If you set it to task, it will do that in the background on your behalf. But as with an intern, you might well want to check the output as a subject matter expert and validate that what it's come up with is correct, because you might need to do another iteration to provide some more guidance and focus it on the right direction. So what I'll also talk about at this stage is the fact that as an organisation, we're also looking to develop education co-pilots. These are currently in private preview with a select number of organisations around the world. And these are some of the areas that we are exploring that may appear in future releases available to the general market. I think it's important that people understand that these things are happening behind the scenes, because if you haven't picked up on this, you might think, well, when am I going to see some education? We're working on it. It's in the pipeline. And so I think with that, we're kind of on to this next phase. For those organisations that are embarking on this journey, this set of guidance is aimed at the decision makers and the leaders within the organisation. It's a set of tooling that begins to raise the importance of structures such as AI councils. As you embark on a journey in this space, there will be questions about the ethics and how do we communicate this, and what about the trade unions, and what about staff concerns over the AI replacing them within the workforce. All of this stuff. Like, you need to have a body that is able to act in a very high level and make the strategic approaches. I was delighted to see when Ian shared it earlier this morning that the Open University are well on a track to that, because it's a fundamental essential of sustaining a journey in this space. So this is a set of resources for decision makers, for those people who are on the front line charged with implementing this within the organisations. The success kit, both in the generic form and the particular one that we've developed for education, are designed to help and support. A lot of the work that I and my colleagues within my team and Microsoft are involved in is supporting organisations who are at different stages in this journey. Okay, so sometimes you want to be able to have that conversation with us or other organisations to help understand how do we actually implement this, what other learnings are there from the field, from those people who are a bit further along. I think my message would be, if you take those two sets of supporting materials, combined with the right leadership and support structures within any organisation, it's a great way to address the common blockers that we hear when we engage in this topic of conversation around AI adoption. And you can see some of the things that tend to emerge here on the screen. As a company, I think Microsoft have seen things in a slightly different light. I think our view is that this is a next wave that will be characterised not by a pressure to keep up or adapt, but an opportunity to innovate. Part of that innovation is having the right team in place to capitalise on the moment. And if we look at part of the Microsoft organisational structure, LinkedIn is part of that. And what we see in LinkedIn is a significant increase in professionals adding AI skills to their profiles. Most leaders now say they wouldn't hire someone without AI skills. So it's not just about having the technical skills, it's about having people skills, new analytical, emotional and critical thinking skills. I've had the pleasure of meeting a number of students who have cottoned onto this, and they've acquired those skills, and as they emerge as recent graduates, they are hot property in the employment market. They get snapped up very quickly because there's a skill shortage, and people who are able to clearly articulate a knowledge and understanding of some of these core principles and bring it into a workplace context, they're very powerful because they help bridge a lot of the divides that exist between desire from an organisational leadership perspective and the requirement to implement that and put things into operational practice. So I spoke in broad terms there. When Microsoft did its early publication of findings from our work with the early S500 adopters of technology, one of the interesting findings was that the members of the organisation who got the most value from the adoption of generative AI technologies were established people managers. And that's because they were naturally good at delegation. They knew when to turn to AI and ask AI to pick up the heavy lifting for them because they were used to doing it with their teams on a day-to-day basis. Many of the key skills that universities have been teaching for years around critical thinking equally apply in this space. They're going to be very important in the economy moving forward. At least that's the market intelligence that we have as Microsoft. In terms of what we're doing at a global scale to help people get to grips with this rapid adoption of generative AI technologies, there is a summary on here. I think what I would add to what you can see on the slide is that Microsoft is actively working to build skills and nurture talent in the global workforce, especially in the context of generative AI adoption. And I mean, I'll just put it in words to reiterate the point, but a very important thing, and what we're doing is supporting a number of different events. This one, the Educated Innovators Forum, took place in April in Arlington in Virginia. That was in partnership with the World Bank, the Global Partnership for Education, and UNESCO. And as we talk in Fortaleza in Brazil, UNESCO are getting together, and I think as they're looking at the importance of AI in their journey as an organisation as they move forwards as well. So I spoke about accelerators before. From primary school all the way through into higher education, we have a range of tooling that's now supporting this journey and is available to empower school children and universities, students, the teachers and the academics that are supporting them on that journey, both in terms of tooling that provides direct one-to-one coaching and support for the student, reduces the admin workload for the staff, and provides great visibility on the progress of cohorts of students as they track through. Okay? As an academic now, what you can begin to do is identify who's struggling, and you can focus more support on those. And you can use the AI to dynamically provide content to your more advanced learners to help them push their own personal boundaries. Okay? And it will dynamically provide the content within a guided set of boundaries which you as the subject matter expert prescribe for your cohort of students. So some very interesting things happening in that space. Microsoft offers several programs to support learning and skills development in schools and universities. These slides will be available afterwards. Appreciate that's a bit of an eye test for some. The Imagine Cup is something that we've run for a number of years and that Satya personally gets involved in because we just see it as a very key initiative for raising this subject within student populations. And we have materials that cover the broad skills spectrum. I just wanted to pause here and bring another example from the US. So Indiana State University and Babson College were on a panel similar to the one that we had before. And they were talking about what they were doing in response to the employment market demand for graduates with AI skills. The focus on student success in terms of AI is there from day one. Right? From that very first week that the students arrive on campus, they're getting the students to think about how they're going to market their AI skills in their final year as they're becoming graduates. They've developed a technology, they call it the Career Coach. It's training an AI with the support from human subject matter experts in different disciplines that allows the students to have an ongoing engagement and kind of fine-tune their pathway and the modules and other additional things that they might choose to do as they work through. As they were talking about their success in this endeavour, one of the things that really stood out to me was them talking about the way in which this has been a big equity to access boost for those people who've been participant. Particularly, they said, for first-generation university students, in that case, they've seen the biggest boost to student outcomes. They reported in a similar way to that I referred to earlier that generative AI has eased anxiousness and builds confidence in those who have access to the tools. It allows that rehearsal prior to interview and in other scenarios, reduces cognitive overload, and also is a great way of levelling the playing field. So their words, not mine, I'll just be playing to you what they said at that session last week. I wanted to share with you this. This is a view of some of the learning content that's available through Microsoft Learn, a number of pathways that are tied more closely to the AI subject. We have a very large set of materials available, and I'll provide some more links and details later on. But these are being made available to students in education at the moment, right? So you can factor this into your curriculum. If you're an employer, you can factor this into your workforce development plans. One of the areas where we're seeing a particularly high level of adoption of this approach is around cyber and cyber security. So very relevant for the education sector. You're according to the report that we published a couple of weeks ago, now the third most targeted industry in the world. Take into account that's government, military, energy, and all the others. Education is a prime target, right? So you're under a lot of pressure. The Chief Information Security Officer at Oregon State University has 60% of his security team, they're students. Right? He's employed them from within the university, and they're using AI to get those students up to speed and to become more effective analysts. And he reports it's reduced the onboarding time for that workforce by up to 2 months. Okay, so they're ramping up far more quickly, and once they're in post, they're being far more effective. He describes this as a key step in keeping ahead of what he calls the cyber jerks that he's having to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So I think some very interesting learnings emerging. Our approach has been really to create a situation where educational materials are designed to ensure that our next generation of decision makers and leaders are cognizant of these new technologies, the risks and the opportunities that are presented. And another example, just to put it into the mix, University of California, San Diego, one of the ways in which they've adopted the use of this technology is to look at the job descriptions that they're producing. one of the thinking was, well, we need to make sure we're including some requirements about AI within the job descriptions we have in the future. And so they've been using AI to reduce the time it takes to redefine job descriptions. So they had about 1,300 job tracks. It used to take 3 to 4 hours to fully review a job description and republish it, and they've now got that down to 90 minutes using AI. So a decent time saving in that particular use case for quite a complex process with workflow in a number of particular stages. So I'm kind of into the closeout here. I'm sure that many of you are interested in learning a bit more about what we're doing. So again, here are a set of resources targeted to people in different roles. So these are accessing learning courses that we have available. If you were looking for a bit more granularity, well, we've got that in there as well, things that are focused to both students, faculty, and various adoption materials which might be more relevant to the IT departments within your organisation. Covering the full spectrum, right? We go into the detail on responsible AI and give people perspective. Now, all of this is through a Microsoft lens. Other platforms exist. If you wanted a slightly more rounded view, I would highly recommend that you take this course if you haven't already done it. We created it around about a year ago. It's a joint effort between Microsoft and LinkedIn. It's free. You can do it. And if you want a qualification, there's also an exam at the end. But I pre-warn you, it's not easy. So it will test you. But what it will do is it will give you exposure to a full set of AI technologies and how they're now being used in a very broad set of use cases, whether that's production of video and music, as we saw in the previous presentation, or in other ways. So hopefully that's been insightful and somewhat helpful. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So, any questions? In the front row, yes.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Fabulous presentation. Thank you very much. So interestingly, when you said that AI will transform rather than disrupt education, actually some of the value of education is that independent critical thinking, that completely out of the box. How do you see AI, rather than perhaps in the first generation of AI, creating bubbles around individuals and actually amplifying same thing? How do you see the next generation of AI, particularly in research and development and advanced learning, actually creating or continuing to create those independent critical thinkers?
So that's a very good question. What I would observe from some recent work is in solving some of the difficult scenarios that people are coming to us with, we're now combining different technologies together to take a best of breed approach. And I think there was a view that it was very singular, like there's this way of doing it. And I think we've challenged that convention and said, well, actually, we need to bring together different mindsets and perspectives. I come from an interdisciplinary research background. I got a lot of value talking to people who are outside of my sphere, my expertise, and I think we can bring that same thinking into here. If we look at some of these difficult challenges and problems that we face in education, we need that very inclusive approach. Okay. One of the things that I've taken a lot of value from over the last 18 months is to have exposure to a very broad set of thinking from outside the UK, from outside of Europe, and to hear the different challenges that are coming back. Some very real world challenges like, well, I haven't even got basic internet, so how am I supposed to do some of these things? So there are some genuine challenges that we need to address as a society. A lot of the technologies that we're building are going to benefit from the next iteration of the large language models that become available. Martin was talking about his surprise and delight about suddenly having access to something that wasn't possible just a few weeks previously. And certainly in my experience, it's the same. So I'll give you an example to put a bit of colour on that. Been working with a particular university, and one of the things we've developed is a set of frequently asked questions that will be made available to staff, and actually we'll be able to point the AI at it so you can have a conversation and get those outputs. Initially, when we launched the M365 Copilot, it was only possible to get responses on documents you had opened in the session or you had open at the time. The technology has now moved on, right? If you have got access to that document within your organisation, and you've got read access to it, it will be able to answer questions based on that document and your access to it within your organisation. So we're seeing this iterative and gradual improvement in the capability, and that enhancement is coming all the time. So I think I've given a very ranged answer to your question, apologies, but it's such an expansive subject. We need to look at the more nuanced use cases and tackle one by one.
Any more questions? Yes.
Hello, my name is Oyinda Mola, and I run an edtech business. Great presentation, by the way. One of the things I do is I have a passion project that helps the underrepresented to build skills that help them to become more employable. I see you are doing a lot with higher institutions in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And I can see also that Microsoft has great features and opportunities to help people build skills to be employable after school. Well, we have a demographic of people who went through school in past generations, and they have the skill gap. They didn't have the opportunity that people who go to school now have. And there are a lot of social enterprises that are filling that gap. So my question is, how are you collaborating with these social enterprises and not-profits to help people build those AI skills and soft skills that will help them become more employable? Thank you.
That's a great question, and thank you for the work that you're doing on behalf of society in general. I think one of the key things that we do is a lot of those resources that I was just showing at the end, they're all freely available, right? And this is a key principle of our approach. If you're a student enrolled in education, even when it comes to the exams that you would normally have to pay for, there's special provision to allow you to be enabled on that journey, right? So I think one of our big things is to make those resources available. And then through examples like the Education Innovation Forum that I referenced that happened in April, we're working in a partnership approach with other large organisations to provide a more inclusive approach. When it comes to individual organisations, as I said, we've got programmes which are designed to support educators in understanding how they can weave in some of these resources into our environment. And then if you've got people who are generally just trying to get access to this, well, in addition to the freely available resources, if people are prepared to, then through LinkedIn Learning, there are additional resources which provide a different perspective, often with a subject matter expert fronting that and pointing people to other relevant content. So there is that broad set of resources that are available. And then based on your local region, we'll have different organisations within Microsoft aligned to support what you're trying to achieve as well. So it might be worth having a follow-up conversation to make sure you've got access to that support.
Okay. Any final question? Otherwise, we are actually at time. Yeah. Was that a hand? No. Okay, yes. Yes, go on.
Would you ever consider putting in face-to-face training hubs?
Sorry, wait for the microphone.
Have you considered putting in face-to-face training hubs throughout regions? Because actually, even working in a university where people have access to all of these tools, the biggest thing that comes up is it's really difficult to use the self-serve resources, finding them, but also if you don't have the confidence and you don't understand what you're doing with these tools and it's all new and we don't have the trainers in the same way. I remember years ago going to Learn Direct offices in the town to learn Excel and Word, yep. I mean, how to do them both. And we seem to have lost that, of going back to the human aspect of actually that connection and people being able to ask questions and that face-to-face training. And there's almost, we feel like we're coming kind of full circle that actually to really upskill. And for the lady behind there, who's mentioned about societal things, there's a real gap. There's people who have so lack of confidence. And even myself, I quite often have to speak to colleagues on how to do something because I just can't get the answers from an online and self-serve resource.
Really good question. Sitting at the back over there, Lucy Ashworth is the account executive with Open University. So from an institutional perspective, please have a chat with Lucy and we'll see what we can do to support you. As a company, I think there's an expectation that our resources are very expansive, but we are under a lot of demand at the moment. So we're very dependent on our partner ecosystem. Organisations like Infosys, who are sponsoring today's event, and others are part of our solution to that in broader terms. And there's what we can do as a freely available resource, and then what we can do through an engagement with you. There's a slight difference in that. Then it's a case of, okay, well, in terms of our support for enabling access to this, we've kind of got an arm within Microsoft which is more philanthropic, and so there are elements that we're doing through that in a similar way. Again, with the Education Industry Forum example, was exploring how do we need to grow and propagate that to ensure that we've got that broad-based sustainability. We're moving at pace on this, right? We're developing the technology, and we're trying to develop the resources that go alongside it and maintain that on a regular basis. The phrase was used earlier, the jagged technology frontier. This is one of the constant challenges, right? You might have learnt it 18 months ago, but have you kept up with that latest development? It's an ongoing challenge for society now, how we maintain the pace of understanding. Very, very early on in this scenario, I think academic colleagues took something from the fact that initially generative AI couldn't answer questions on things that had only just happened within a 6-9 month period. But within a very short space of time, that evaporated, and it was able to answer questions from the general internet. So we've got to find a way of maintaining knowledge and understanding, and if we can do so in partnership with universities and education organisations, that feels like a great approach.